Hey everyone, this is 𝐀𝐿 here with a YouTube, I think our second YouTube live. You have me, Jon Tai, one of the co-founders. You have my other co-founder, Mike Ian, and we have a special guest here today, Blake Johnson, our design director at 𝐀𝐿. And we're here today just to have a small casual chat about design thinking. And reason being is that we've just been getting a lot of questions about what is design thinking? How does 𝐻2O define design thinking? And we know there's been a lot. It's a common buzzword, and we just figured we deconstruct that a little bit and give you kind of our perspective on what that is, right? Yeah. So with that, why don't we just get started? And maybe we can kind of tell the audience about how we here kind of overarchingly define design thinking. I don't know, Blake, Mike, you want
Sure.
to start with that?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Sure.
So for me, design thinking is going to be the process of defining a problem and laying out a foundation or a framework for solving that problem, right? Plain and simple. I think that's as clean as I can make it.
Sure, yeah. So if you remember the blog that we posted a while back, we kind of listed out like 5 different categories of design thinking. First being empathize, and then define, ideate, and then prototype and test, right? So from an engineering perspective, I guess you can say that we sort of focus somewhere in the middle and towards the end, as far as like those 5 main areas go.
Yeah. And yeah, go ahead.
Well, and I think so the reason we're kind of defining this for you guys, we wanted to just establish that okay, we know design thinking, quote unquote, has been really used in the tech industry and even workshops now for non-designers to use, and we think that's really cool. We think that design is being valued across all disciplines now, and the way at which design solves problems has been really good. How we really see the benefit of doing our process and framework around design thinking is because there's a lot of value with hardware in particular. It's very hard. There's not much room for error because there's tooling and things involved. And we can get into UI and UX and how software there's similar, but with hardware in particular, we find that when we go through kind of this 5-stage process, and we can kind of get into how we do it, it just really helps us land at predictable results every time for all of our clients, and favorable results as well. So I don't know, should we just kind of get into it about, Mike, you listed those 5 different ones. Maybe we can just define how we go about doing that.
Yeah. So the 5 steps, right? So Mike mentioned engineering. The engineering side kind of comes into the tail end, right? Design starts off with that empathize, define, and ideate stage. And that's where we're going to do most of the work to figure out what the solution to the problem is, right? And that takes a whole design process, which is how we structure all of our projects, right? So we're going to go through very specific steps that we've tested, we've refined, we've proven can help create a pathway to that successful solution, as Jon said.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where design comes in, and then we hand off to engineering for ideation, for prototyping and testing. But all 5 steps basically are very important, and you really kind of need design and engineers who are trained in this to do well. That's something we see a lot of workshops for business leaders and entrepreneurs who can take these courses in design thinking and learn about it, and that's great, and it's very helpful and important to understand it. And then I think designers and engineers are kind of necessary to partner with to actually execute those steps and get those reliable results.
Yeah, and I think it's really important. And I want to bring back to Mike too, because the implementation part of it, that's a huge critical part, right? Because problem solving, at the end of the day, everyone can say they're intellectual, they're smart. People can run sprints or design sprints, but ultimately the testing and the prototyping and the implementation, that's a huge part of our process here at 𝐻2O. And Mike is really critical to that, because him and his engineering team, they make it happen, right? Our design team, we can ideate and empathize all we want, but until we can actually tool the parts, it just really we're not able to actually put it out into the field. So I don't know if you want to talk about that.
I think okay, so when it comes to launching a product or just to get to an EVT DVT stage, we don't necessarily say that one is an owner over the other. I think early on, our philosophy is always designers think like engineers, engineers think like designers, and so we try to apply that philosophy throughout all 5 stages in our development phases of work. And so when it comes to to start the project, empathize, define, that is often led by industrial design team, but there's some input from the engineering team, because we sort of help the ID team define how large that sandbox is that they're playing in, right?
Yep.
We try to set up those barriers, those I guess not create a roadblock, but we set up those barriers, and then towards the middle during that handoff, when we ideate, prototype, and test, that's sort of where the engineering team leads. But at the same time, the roles are reversed, where the industrial design team helps us audit to make sure that we're on the right track.
Yeah, totally. Like the give and take, right? So yeah, I think that's critical, because I think the empathy part, right, defining the user experience that we want, that kind of guides the testing that we do on any prototypes as well. So yeah, I agree that it's fully intermingled and all together.
Yeah, and whenever you have, like, for example, some projects that have an electronic component or software firmware component, that doesn't only apply to mechanical engineering, right? So you have to bring in those other areas of expertise, those other stakeholders, and I feel like industrial design sort of melds all those areas of expertise.
Yeah, and just kind of adding to the point of like design and industrial designers in general, I think like design thinking, it really gives us consistent results, right? Like I think this methodology, it's not the only methodology. I think there's many different ways on how to get from point A to point Z. This one just happens to work for our team and has given us very predictable, consistent results. Now, also like with working with designers too. So that's like something, how does this methodology kind of help frame creativity, right? Because designers are kind of, a little different breed, let's call it, right?
Sure.
They think differently. They're maybe a little more sensitive. Their empathy, their level of empathy is very high, but because of that, they're very sensitive. So how does this framework maybe help to get those really good results? And maybe you can speak to that. Like,
I can kind of play off of what Mike was saying, right? Like the design thinking process creates guardrails, basically. Kind of like you said, right? I like to use an analogy of a sandbox, right? Like we have to define the edges of the sandbox that our designers can play in. We don't want to define what happens within that sandbox. We just need to build it, like give them a space and then let them kind of be creative and free. So part of that is the interaction with engineering. The other part is the design thinking process. That empathize and define step really helps us kind of nail down what those boundaries are and what we're trying to do also, right? Like what is the goal and what are the restrictions and requirements, and then from there we can kind of go tackle it.
Yeah. Before, when we were having coffee before this started, Mike, we were kind of talking about innovation. How can we maybe like explain to the audience, like, how does design thinking promote innovation? Whereas like I think there's a common misconception that design thinking is like, oh, they're designing something to make it look pretty. That's design thinking. Like, but really, like you're saying something about innovation and different ideas. Can we maybe speak to that? How that methodology leads to that?
If I'm from the outside looking in, I think there's excitement from every stage, right? So empathize, like that first stage, it's like it's kind of boring. When it comes to defining, like that's when things start to get exciting. When you start seeing concepts, when you start seeing the framework, and then that sort of builds up into the ideate phase. So at that ideate phase, John, as you mentioned, the innovation, I think that really sparks a lot of ideas. And before we were having coffee, before this, the YouTube live, the point I was trying to make, right, was we often look to other industries, other areas for ideas, for inspiration, and I think that's sort of where a lot of the ideas come to the table. We bring to the table, and we're able to sort of distill. And on some of the projects, as you've noticed, like we like for example, one of the current projects, we're looking at museum type of preservation, right? Something that's almost like not necessarily closely related to the project we're working on, but that's just an example. Like we're looking at other industries on ways where we can reuse, upcycle, or repurpose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think instead of reinventing the wheel, which oftentimes can be really expensive, we try to look at other proven examples.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah. And I think like, you know, doing all these 5 attributes in their subsequent order actually will lead to the results, like good results in that way. Because, like you said, you do have to set up a framework before you start ideating. If us as designers just start throwing out ideas without the framework, without empathy in place, then it's basically just going to lead us to be chasing our tails. And I think that's why the framework really works, to harness creativity in the right direction. So I think that's why it's been pretty advantageous for us to adopt this process here at Hatchfield.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And
If
this
you
is
start just from a design brief and just let people run loose, like there's going to be a lot of wasted time.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So I think to sum it all up, it gives us efficiency, it gives us direction, it gives us opportunity for innovation.
Yeah. So overall good results.
Yeah. And I mean, it really just harnesses the power of like idea and engineering working together.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then further downstream, prototype, build, stage, and testing, it ensures that we're able to de-risk before you start cutting tooling or you start committing to manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Manufacturing.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It saves on costly rework.
Yes.
Yeah.
Especially for products or projects that have ergonomics involved. Since we work a lot on head ergonomics, it's very important for us to prototype and test numerous times.
Yeah.
To learn.
Yeah. Almost endlessly.
Yes.